Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Art Forum. My name's David Sequeira, and I'm the director of the Margaret Lawrence Gallery, and I'm also the person that has the pleasure of programming the Art Forum program for the Victorian College of the Arts. And before we get started, I apologise if you can hear all that background noise. Before we get started, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the Woonwurrung and Wurundjeri people of the Greater Kulin Nation, and to remember that for generations before the Victorian College of the Arts or the University of Melbourne was even thought of, that song, dance, paintings, sculpture, stories were all shared on this land, and that these rituals continue today. And it's with great joy that I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. This session of Art Forum is presented in conjunction with the Melbourne Reconciliation Network. Now to our guest speaker. Glenda Nicholls is a Waddi Waddi, Ngarrindjeri and Yorta Yorta artist based in the Swan Hill region of Victoria. Her cultural name is Jule Yarra Minj, translating to Little River Girl, and her Ngarrindjeri totem is, and I hope I pronounce this word properly, is Writcharuki, or willy-willy wagtail. Did I get it right, Glenda?
Good. It's not bad.
Okay, you can help me out in a moment. Glenda is a master weaver, constructing elaborate sculptural work that connects the present with the ancestral past. Glenda applies cultural weaving techniques that she acquired alongside intimate knowledge of the waterways, river plants and grasses of her ancestral country. Glenda is determined to share her cultural knowledge with younger First Nations generations, seeing this exchange as crucial to ensuring cultural practices survive into the future. In 2018, Glenda was invited to exhibit at the 4th Pulima Indigenous Arts Festival, Taipei, Taiwan, and in late 2020, Glenda was awarded with the prestigious University of Melbourne Hurchinson Indigenous Fellowship. Her major commission, Miwi Milloo, Good Spirit of the Murray River, is included in the NGV Triennial. Wherever you are, please make Glenda welcome.
Hi, I'm Glenda Nicholls and I'm a river girl from Swan Hill, and that's in northern Victoria. I grew up around the mighty Milloo, which is the Murray River, as we call it, Milloo, and I'm a descendant of the Yorta Yorta, Waddi Waddi and Ngarrindjeri people. Pretty good pronunciation there, David, you weren't far off. My storyline comes from the footprints of my ancestors, who have handed down the blueprints of their crafts to my elders. My elders have passed this knowledge on to me. Today, those blueprints are reflected in our family practice and in my own art practice in many different art forms. My craft reflects the continuity of family storyline. It reflects the stories of my elders and my ancestors and the connection between the past and the present. As Aboriginal people, we connect to country through the environment using traditional and contemporary methods to produce culturally relevant pieces of art or craft. I'd like to tell you the story of these 3 cloaks. So keeping with my net making style, I made 3 cloaks that represent a woman's rite of passage to country. The cloaks are representative of my mother's and father's people that lived along the Murray River, extending from Yorta Yorta country right through to Swan Hill and stretching across to the Coorong in South Australia. Here are the Milloo welcome cloaks, or the cloaks of the Murray River. When weaving these cloaks, I found that the cloaks decided that they wanted to represent Aboriginal women and the role Aboriginal women play in welcoming people to country and ceremony. To me, the cloaks show that they quietly remember the mostly unspoken history of the treatment of Aboriginal women in early settlement of Australia. I used raw twine or jute string for my cloaks, and it was the closest fibre I could think of that resembled bush twine. I incorporated the possum skin cloak or collar to each cloak. Each cloak has then told me what it wanted to wear. So the cloaks were finished when they were finished. I had no set idea on how they were to be finally presented, but I was pretty pleased with the end result. The first cloak I want to mention is the Acknowledgement of Country cloak. And that's the one in the middle of this picture.
This one here.
The Acknowledgement cloak sought to be plain, as this meant that any one person could wear it to acknowledge country. The second cloak is that of the senior person or the elder of a community, and I've called this one the Elder Cloak, which is that one, the one on the right. So the Elder Cloak is noble but plain, hence the natural colouring of the string and emu feather fringe. But it also wanted a mussel shell as a decoration, and you can just see the mussel shell just inside.
Oh, it's here.
The cloak piece there. So, and lastly, to complement both the Acknowledgement of Country cloak and the Elder's Cloak, I have included the Welcome Cloak. And that's the scarlet red one on the left-hand side. The Welcome Cloak chose the scarlet red from the red dye it was soaked in, and then asked for token items of red, black and yellow of the Aboriginal flag. Then it wanted a piece of black velvet and a sixpence and a chain around the collar. As I sewed the chain onto the collar, it asked for a padlock and a cross and some trinkets and a mirror, which have all been incorporated into the cloak. These are the political sides to the Welcome Cloak. So on one hand, it was bright and welcoming, but on the other, it required the history to be told. The three cloaks represent the acknowledgement and welcome of people to country, as is the correct protocol at meetings, crowd gatherings and get-togethers, etc. And that's what David did at the beginning of this session. So these cloaks won with the Deadly Victorian Indigenous Art Award in 2015, and they're now in the collection of the Museum of Applied Science in Sydney. So the inbuilt knowledge and skills handed down from our ancestors, it gives us this storyline. So and as the years flow on, I'm learning more and more about my art around net making and using that knowledge to create artwork in different forms, whilst also building on my other skills to complement the styles. My weaving is my connection to country. And you can see on this piece, I've incorporated my feather flower art form to make this curtain. And these flowers were made from the feathers of pheasants. I was handed a whole bag full of feathers. And after sorting through them, I was able to come up with this beautiful selection. I've added in an extra slide, which you won't see at the moment. So just to describe, my feather art is a practice that's been handed down through my maternal grandmothers. And you might have seen the picture at the beginning. We might go back to that photo if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. I get to go back. Look. This one?
Yeah, yes. So in this photo, you can see my great-grandmother Christina on the left-hand side wearing the hat.
Here she is, this little one.
And in the front is a picture of my mum.
This one. Oh, here she is there.
So my mum was the eldest of this little group, this little family group. And I'm hoping that my poem will sort of explain a bit about that picture. I've called it Christina, and it goes like this. My great-grandmother used bird feathers in traditional ways of old to decorate baskets and bodies and such, or so I've been told. But then she left home with her grandchildren, she went, to hide them from the authorities, were just not content in letting them all lead a life which was meant. For half-caste children were not either here nor there, for you see their tribe didn't want them. And you said, well, neither do we, not as they are. We'll have to take check and take these kids away for their enrichment. So Great Nan modernised her feathercraft and made feather flowers and beautiful bouquets, which she sold for a coin to help buy food along the way. It was Depression time, the 1930s, and hard to survive, especially for these kind of families. They travelled around the North Victorian country and came to a place near Swan Hill where they could almost feel free. Now today, all I have left as a great-granddaughter to keep is this story and feathercraft that's so special to me. I feel somewhat cheated and sad because I just couldn't find out exactly how the feathers were traditionally used and did a complete turnabout. So I'm hoping that explains the story behind that picture. This was when my grandparents and my great-grandparents, Christina and Robert wearing the hat, holding the two little boys, put all their grandchildren, their half-caste grandchildren into a horse cart and travelled all around South Australia and Victoria until they finally settled in Swan Hill. So a lot of craft I acknowledge comes from my great-grandmother Christina and her mothers before her. We'll go back to the next slide now. Thanks, Simone.
Pleasure. There we are.
So my net making processes and techniques continue to be keeping in with weaving and knotting processes of the bygone days. So here's just a few of the crafts that I've made over the last couple of years. This net is now in the Swan Hill Art Gallery collection. And there again, you'll see that these feather flowers are incorporated into that piece.
Oh, hello.
Okay, so there's another.
There we are.
Here we go. Sorry, I think I've had my slides mixed up. My fault. So this cloak modelled by one of my nephews, I've called it the Warriors Cloak. And I've gifted this one to my special cousin, Jason Tamaru, who lives here in Melbourne. And I look to him as one of the warriors of our Nicholls family. So it was a pretty special piece, and I know he was really happy to receive that one. I like to sometimes incorporate the feather flowers to my nets to make the storyline stronger. So there are emu feather flowers on a saltbush net that I called it the saltbush net because it looked like saltbush. And this one is now, or this piece is now in the Mildura Arts Centre collection in Mildura. So my journey with the nets has been different, to say the least. Even my little friend shown here helping me weave this net. He wanted to get in on the action. And he actually unravelled a whole ball of string while I was weaving this piece. So I'm not sure what happened, but I believe my ancestors set me on the journey with the nets for a reason. This is the ochre net that won the Victorian Indigenous Art Award for 3-dimensional works and the Koori Heritage Trust Acquisition Award. And it's now in the collection of the Koori Heritage Trust. I'm not really a water person, or maybe I am. I grew up on the banks of the Murray River, or the mighty Milloo, and being told over and over again by my elders as a young child to stay away from the water because the bunyip will get you. Because of that bunyip, I'm not a very good swimmer. And for those who do not know what a bunyip is, for me, after doing a bit of research, they were the megafauna that roamed around in Australia in the Pleistocene. I'll get my tongue around this, Pleistocene age. I've got to tell you a little story from my childhood days. Well, I guess that was in my teens, and we lived on a small farm back then. My brother and I were walking through a paddock and found a baby owl. It was just so cute. I don't know if any of you have seen any baby owls, but this one was really, really cute. So we picked it up and we took it home. And at the time, my maternal grandmother was staying with us. well, she saw us coming and said, what have you got there? And, you know, we showed her this cute little bird and she let out an almighty scream and said, you get that away from here. I'm going to smoke you kids bringing that thing here. Well, my brother and I were a bit shocked because, you know, Nan never spoke to us like that before. And we could feel the fright she was feeling in the way she spoke and acted. We could feel that fright that she held within her. And we didn't want to get smoked because that's when you were held over a smouldering fire of smoke until you practically turned blue. Well, that's what we were told when we were young. The imagination got away with us kids back then. So, you know, nothing was explained in full what a smoking was. Today, we know that you get smoked to get rid of bad spirits or bad energies. Anyway, my brother and I backed off real quick and took that little bird back where we found it, leaving it there in a safe place and hope that its mum found it. And poor old Nan, well, she didn't speak to us for some time after that little event. And we couldn't really understand why until we got older and learnt more about the stories. At that time, we asked Mum, well, you know, why was Nan so strange with us? And she said, well, that was a minka bird. And they'd come down in the middle of the night and take the children away. Now, you know, that sort of puzzled me for a while, but as I grew older and knowing a bit more about the giant marsupials and that roamed Australia back then, and these stories have been handed down from generation to generation. I believe the minka was a large prehistoric bird that existed alongside Aboriginal people within Australia back then. Okay, so this is one of my favourite nets, the cast net. It's made of recycled carpet wool. The sinkers are made from all quandong seeds. And a quandong seed, it's a traditional Australian plant seed from a fruit, and it's high in vitamin C. So in this net, it's still in my collection. I love fishing, you know, as a young person. I guess growing up along the Murray River, you can't help but, you know, sort of go fishing whenever you get the chance. So for me, growing up and living near the waterways has always given me a sense of being grounded when I needed healing. So here's another piece that was in my collection that I made. It's a scoop net, and it's made from a willow tree branch used for catching fish, crayfish, and yabbies. So this piece is now in the collection of DELP, or the Department of Environment, Water, Land and Planning. You know, I once read a really wonderful story. It was a Writcharuki story of how the first man and women came about. And in that story, it mentioned that men were made from clay and women were found in the water. One day I asked my mum, you know, why is water so important to women? And she said, without even blinking an eyelid, water is life. I asked why, and she said, well, babies are born in water. If there's no water, there is no life. So then, you know, it all made sense to me. Without water, our babies would die. And this piece represented to me water. So in this slide, we have the Milloo net. It's shown as a backdrop here, and it's one of the bigger nets that I've made. I originally made this net for the 10th Mildura Biennale in 2015, but it's been exhibited at the Acker Gallery, Creative Arts Workshop in Little Flinders Street, and I'm not sure if that's still there, and at the RMIT Gallery in Melbourne. So this net's been exhibited a couple of times in a couple of places, but it's now in the collection of the Warriors Aboriginal College at Healesville. You can see it there with the beautiful fish traps. I'm unsure of the makers of the fish traps or the eel traps, but they sure do complement each other. Okay, so this is the same net, but it's at the Acker Gallery with the women's rite of passage cloaks. So when I first started net weaving, I was told that women don't make nets. Well, no, wrong. Women did make nets. To me, it seemed like a whole family thing to find the fibre to make the string and then weave the net. I was lucky in that my father encouraged all 6 daughters at an early age to go outside the box of female duties and explore the special gifts we each had, and to never be restricted in what we wanted to do in life. I often reminisce about my father, whose cultural teachings were a special reminder of my parents' partnership within our family unit. Well, as you can see, it didn't stop me making nets. It made me even more determined. So when I'm weaving my nets, I think a lot about my Aboriginal ancestors and how they would have first had to find the fibres, to make the string, to make the net, to drag the waters, to collect the fish, to feed the families. And this picture shows me out on country. I was out on country with my sister, and we were harvesting grasses to have a go at making some string. So you could imagine how much string you'd need to make a net, a fish net. So we as Aboriginal people no longer use those tools of yesteryear. Now our mob make art to keep the weaving and craft practices alive. And this is a beautiful little piece that I made for a couple of years ago when the vote was for equal marriage rights. So it's too difficult to go out on country to find the grasses, to harvest, to make the string, to make the nets these days. Environmental wear and tear on the land is damaging the plant life. We now find the grass fibres are brittle from chemicals used on the land. And sometimes where we would go out on country to harvest our fibres, there's none, because the land has been cleared to prevent the grasses from growing on properties where there were sheep or cattle or vegetables. And as the fibres we use grow near the waterways, well, you know, that's another story. I'm not sure if we're all aware of what's happening with the Murray-Darling Basin, the waterways there. So I won't elaborate, except to say that we all need to be more waterwise. Today I can go to the store and buy string, jute string, to make my nets. So it's not the same as going out on country to harvest the grasses with my mother or my sisters, but it saves time. You know, and we're not cleansing and healing the land as we once did when we as family groups went out on country to do our harvesting. This picture is one where my sisters and I were harvesting grasses with our mum. So that's our mum here some years back now. So mum's much older now, turning 90 earlier this year. And you know, she's still weaving. So in 2019, I was asked to make a net to fill the space in the foyer of the National Gallery in Melbourne for their, I'm going to get my tongue around this correctly, Triennial. Sourcing feathers was a challenge. Found feathers are usually used. And, you know, for those that don't know, found feathers, they're ones you find laying on the ground anywhere. Well, you know, I needed lots and lots of found feathers to make 1,000 flowers. And found feathers I did not have. It's a bit like a tongue twister. I was lucky to find a reputable company though, and they didn't exploit the animals. And I'd like to share that company with you, feathers.com, for any of you that are needing any kind of feathers. Just Google feathers.com. So Hannah Presley, one of the curators at the National Gallery, and I did a bit of online shopping. And I decided on 3mm white cotton for weaving the net. Everything was going to be white feather flowers and white net. I found a company that sold Australian grown cotton, but it was processed in China. And, you know, I was lucky in that I was able to source all my resources before COVID-19 brought us all into lockdown and the boats stopped coming. You have to excuse me, I've got Melbourne sniffles. Okay. So in this picture, you know, you can see the Miwi Milloo, and the beautiful feather flowers. I asked my daughter Melinda, who was living in Queensland at the time, to assist in making some of the feather flowers, 1,000 feather flowers. Did I mention that before? I think I did, but anyway. In that way, keeping the feather flower making storyline continuing. Because while my daughter was making the feather flowers, my granddaughter was watching her, and that's pretty special. And here we have the start to Miwi Milloo. Miwi Milloo was started in early February 2021. COVID lockdown meant that I didn't really have a life, like everyone else during COVID. But it gave me the chance to sit and weave. I went through watching a whole lot of DVDs on my TV as I wove, like the series of McLeod's Daughters, Red Dog 1, Red Dog 2, the environmental series of Two Men in a Tinny, and a whole lot of other movies. I stopped weaving when the net told me to, and that was in October 2021. All the while when I was weaving Miwi Milloo, I was fortunate in that I lived not far from the Milloo River. So my spirit was good and I was able to go for walks along the water's edge. I love this image of Miwi Milloo that was taken outside the National Gallery in Melbourne. You may still have time to see the Triennial before closing, but I guess you better check that with the National Gallery. I think it closes this weekend. And I love this image that was sent to me of the water feature window at the front of the gallery with Miwi Milloo behind. So the baskets, nets and other tools of yesterday we no longer use in our everyday life. Today our mob make art to keep the weaving and craft practices alive. Today the storyline continues and the passing of weaving and craft knowledge is carried into future generations in a contemporary way. We still consult, counsel and acknowledge not only each other, but also our ancestors, promoting self-esteem, pride and acknowledgement of different and yet the same practices within our cultures before, now and into the future. So if you've got any questions, please feel free to contact David or myself through my website, and I'll hand it on to David after this session. Thank you for listening.
Thanks so much, Glenda. Thank you so much. I want to just echo what Glenda suggested, and that is if you have a question, please put it in the Q&A function and we'll make sure that gets to Glenda. I want to kick off with a question, actually, Glenda, about, you talked a little bit about the importance of future generations. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit more about, what sorts of, processes you're thinking about, or what sort of projects you're working on where younger people are involved in weaving and other First Nations practices.
That's a really good question, David. With my fishnet weaving, I've had a couple of workshops over the years, not too many. I think I prefer to teach my own mob first, especially those along the Murray River, the Milloo, right through to the Coorong area. We've had a few workshops, but not nearly enough. COVID sort of stopped a bit of that happening. But I think it's important to keep those processes alive. In my journeys to Honiara in Solomon Islands and Guam and Taiwan, I noticed the fishnet weavers there use the same fishnet weave or the same knotting technique. That was really interesting for me to note that. I'm hoping that soon we'll be able to have some more workshops happening. And I sort of just don't want to see the processes being exploited, as in, I'm saying this tongue in cheek here, with the coiled basket weaving. It's lost the storyline over the years because everybody's doing that now. So to keep the storyline alive, for me, it's pretty important to teach my own mob first. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it really does. It really does. And is there a community in the Swan Hill region that you work with in particular, or like, you know, is there much of your family there, or how have you, you know, how have you kind of established yourself there?
Oh, life's really busy, isn't it? And you know, my kids are, I guess they're flat out trying to survive these days, you know, working and bringing up children. I'm with a weave group in Mildura called the Murray-Darling Weavers, and we've been travelling around. We just started actually before again COVID kicked in, hoping to get those on the road again soon with the weaving, and also Ngarrindjeri and Yorta, which is a group in Bendigo. Again, you know, we were going to be hopefully off to Hawaii last year for the Festival of the Pacific Arts, where it's like a working holiday, just to sort of check out the weaving styles there and find out any similarities. Yeah.
Now, there are a couple of questions that have come in. First one is, thank you so much, Glenda, beautiful work. I'm curious to know if the fishnet weaving has any connection to the spider as a spirit animal, who also catch their food in their weave, and if so, if so, is there a story connected to that? Does that have any connection with what you're doing?
My older sister, actually, that's a really good question. My older sister is sort of trying to do a little bit of research around the spider and its weaving, because that's my mother's country. And I've forgotten the name that we call it in South Australia, but yeah, and it just brings to mind that a younger sister who I live with, we're both weavers, but we have different styles and techniques and processes. We find that when we're not weaving enough, that the old huntsman turns up inside our home, and he prompts us to get back into our weaving. I don't know what it is about that spider, but yeah, he keeps us on our toes. You know, I can put him outside the door, but I think my sister likes to get out the bug spray.
I got it. Another question that's come in: is the technique of weaving and flower making more important for you than the material used, or do you choose the material uniquely for a specific net, their origin being important for this particular project? Like, is there, I guess the question's asking, are the specific materials chosen for specific projects, and is the technique of weaving or flower making more important than the material?
That's a good question too. I'll see if I can remember it all. Old age is getting, you know. Now the feather flowers, as with the net weaving, you know, that storyline's there. So it's important for me to continue that storyline. So I'm, you know, by my daughter watching me when she was younger to make the feather flowers, she's picked it up and she's fine-tuning her own process of making the feather flowers. And while she's making feather flowers, or while she was making the feather flowers, my granddaughter her daughter was watching her. So that's what I call the storyline. It's been handed down. So, you know, for me, it's really, really important. Anyone can just go and make a feather flower, but if it hasn't got the storyline, it's not really, I don't know how to explain it. Yeah, no, I can't explain it. It's just important to me that the storyline gets handed down with the weaving, the craft, or the art, as we call it. We sort of turn a craft into art. And my mum's always said that we as Aboriginal people, we're still here because we adapt. So we adapt to what's around us, and we, with our weaving styles and everything, we adapt to what's around us in the fibres and that we use. In a lot of my fishnets, I like to use jute string because as I said before, going out on country to get the grasses to make the string, it's sometimes, you know, nigh on impossible. So in jute string, that's to me, it represents more like a bush string. It looks more like a bush string and it feels more like a bush string. That's why I like weaving with jute string.
I get it. Now, my last question for you is, I know that you making art is one part of your life and that you took leave from another job to be here. And I was just wondering if you'd be willing to share a little bit about that other job and its relationship with what you do as an artist.
Oh, for sure. Look, I'm not a big time artist. So, you know, you really need another job to bring the money in. I like to do my craft work because I enjoy doing it. And sometimes when it gets to be like a job, for me, that's when I need to pull back and stop for a while because I don't want my craft to become a job. That's something that it's pretty sacred. It's really special that, yeah, again, it's hard to explain that feeling of separating that time and space when you're doing art. I like to have another job also. I work with the Mallee District Aboriginal Services in Swan Hill, which is a health service. And I'm the bringing them home worker there, and I work 3 days a week, Wednesday, Thursdays and Fridays. So I did take leave to come to Melbourne for a week. And I enjoy working with other people. You know, it's that social side of things as well. With my art, I work by myself, except when I'm doing collaborative pieces like with Ngarrindjeri Mimini in Bendigo. It's a lovely little group. We're all so different in what we do. And I think it teaches me to step outside that boundary again of what my dad told me, that, you know, sometimes we mightn't like what someone else is doing, but to be able to work with someone else in an art form, it's really challenging. I'm not sure if I've explained that right, but I enjoy the challenges working with other artists. Sometimes I like some of their work, sometimes I dislike some of their work. But isn't that what art's about? It's supposed to bring us out of our comfort zone and challenge us and make us think more about art. Yeah, I'm sort of just new at this. I've only come into this when I turned 58, you know, and I'm going to be 67 this year. So I've been on a little journey. Even though I've been doing craft a lot of my life, I seem to have taken it more seriously since I won my very first Victorian Indigenous Art Award. Yeah.
Well, Glenda, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your generosity today. Like, it's just, you know, I feel really privileged that you shared the relationship between your family, your art practice, the land you live on. And when I say your family, I don't just mean your immediate family, but, you know, it's very moving to look at those photos of your great-grandparents and you know, consider your practice in light of a lineage. It's very, very moving for us. So thank you so much for that generosity. A big shout out to Simone Slee, who is hiding in the background. There she is. So this talk's taking place from Simone's office. A shout out to my colleague Sue Thornton, who works in external relations, and a big shout out to the Chancellery staff at the University of Melbourne for their assistance in making this talk happen. Thank you everyone for joining us. A big thank you again, Glenda. Such warmth and generosity, it never fails to move us. And we'll see everybody back for Art Forum next Thursday. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.